Welcome everybody to this interview for my YouTube channel. We have a very special guest today, whose name is Aldo Mata. Hello, Aldo. How are you?
Hello, Javier.
Hello.
Nice to be here. Thank you for your kind invitation. I hope you don't regret it after we finish the interview.
I hope not. I hope not. No, I'm sure not.
Hopefully.
So Aldo, you were my teacher in Salamanca for 3 years, but actually we met before in a summer course in Punta Umbría. You remember?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do remember very well. Yeah.
Me too.
Very nice fried fish. Fried fish was delicious over there.
It was a very special summer for me because I mean, it was a change of my understanding of how to make music. And
wonderful.
First, I would like to introduce you as an artist a little bit. I know it's difficult because it's difficult to make a summary of you in a few words, but as I know, you come from an artist family. And was it natural to you to make music, to do music?
That's a very good question, because I think in a way music is one of the most difficult skills that anyone can have. It's not just that you feel the music and you need a special training to get special skills to really do music on a good level, let's say. Like if you want to be a writer, immediately you have the language. I mean, you can do something at a okay level. It doesn't have to be Cervantes, of course, but it's something that is more natural for everybody. We have this language that we are using. Even painting, I think, is sort of not such a difficult skill as music. But music requires discipline, requires devotion, requires many years of building up culture. So you cannot expect someone that is not surrounded by this kind of culture to suddenly say, okay, I want to listen to all the Wagner operas. It's not going to happen. It needs certain environment. And I was lucky. I was very lucky because at home I could hear nice music, classical music. My brother played clarinet and violin, and I could play chamber music with him very soon. So this did help a lot. And it became something, I would say that when I was probably 12 years old is when I was convinced that's the thing I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Something like 11 or 12. I remember the first rehearsal of an orchestra that I ever went to play, and it was playing half an hour there, and I said, "This is it. I mean, there cannot be anything greater than this." So of course, it became the most natural thing, I guess.
And And why did you
Exactly.
choose the cello as your voice? I was always very curious about
That's
why did you choose cello?
yeah. Actually, that's a very good question because I remember a few years ago, I one of the very best musicians in the world for my taste is a bassoonist.
Hmm?
A bassoonist that I think he lives in Basel or he teaches in
Assolini?
Basel. Of course, and
Uh-huh.
and and they did ask him why he played bassoon because
Hmm.
he's such a great musician
Yeah.
that any instrument could have been good for him. And he said it was very nice. He said he was very happy with bassoon. It was, I mean, why not?
Yeah, why
So
not?
I would say, why not? Yeah, exactly. For me, I would say, fortunately, it's cello because the
Hmm.
repertoire, chamber music repertoire, solo repertoire, orchestral repertoire, everything
Hmm.
is big and is magnificent. All the
Yes.
great composers wrote music for cello. Beethoven wrote 5 wonderful sonatas, 3 sets of variations. Unfortunately, if I did play bassoon, I don't think I would
Yes.
have that chance. But well, Azzolini has the 200,000 concertos by Vivaldi, which are so beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So cello, I mean, it was no, but talking seriously, it was totally by chance. I was supposed to play violin actually,
Uh-huh.
but my mother bought a small violin when she had a trip to England, and she
Hmm.
brought a little violin, and it was supposed to be for me. But my elder brother, he got it. He got it.
Ah.
So I didn't have violin anymore. So I was thinking, oh, I want to play violin. This and that is very nice instrument, and it was interesting because the teacher of my brother
Hmm.
his name is Francisco Martin. He was one of the violinists of the Spanish National Orchestra.
Hmm.
His wife is a cellist,
Ah.
and she suggested, say, well, why everybody wants to play violin? It's not about time that we have a little cellist around. And when
Yes.
she mentioned that, my parents were very happy. Oh yes, why not? And I had not the slightest idea. I was like 7 years old or something. I had not the slightest idea what a violoncello was. I say, what was that? But it sounded very exotic and interesting. So I thought,
Hmm.
well, let's give it a try. Why not? And she had 1/4 of a cello, and she
Hmm.
lent it to me, and I started like that, and up to this day. You know? So it's interesting. No, I was very lucky to have a very good teacher to start with because I had a Portuguese teacher called Maria de Macedo.
Hmm.
She did a wonderful job in Spain. And she was my first teacher and my only teacher for the first 8 or 9 years
Hmm.
of my cellistic life, let's say.
Yes.
And she had been a student of Pierre Fournier.
Hmm.
After she became a student of Jan Starker also. So her principles in sound, in music making, were very healthy, I think. And
Hmm.
this was a very good first push into the cello world, let's say.
Hmm. But although there is something that when I first met you, I really was very amazed about, and it's how you are able to change and to make evolution on your playing. I think I've never met someone with such ability to develop changes in the interpretation, in the way of playing, in the way of making the vibrato, the bow. So, why and how did you make this process of evolution in your
Mhm.
interpretation? And who or
Yeah.
what was your main inspiration for that?
Uh-huh. This is a very good perception of yours. I think yeah, one of the things I have been doing from the very beginning is trying to evolve. This I don't know. I was never so satisfied or so lazy that I said, okay, this is it. I want to play like this and goodbye. I thought that was really that's the death for a musician or for an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was interesting as a first point. It was when I was, I think, 13 years old at the time, and I met Christoph Kwan.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, imagine how small I was. And I went to this summer course with him in Granada,
Mm-hmm.
in the Andalusia. And, and we didn't know. I mean, I knew he was very good cellist and he was a specialist in older music and this and that. But I just went there because my teacher told me it's good to
Yes.
go, and I got a scholarship. So I say, well, so good. And I will never forget this moment because I saw that what he was doing, it was completely different than what I was used to.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing to do with the, let's say, the Rostropovich recordings that I had when I was small, or Casal's recording. It was completely different, but at the same time, extremely beautiful and refined.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was playing some Boccherini concerto, and he would go and change articulations and do very fancy, sophisticated bowings and molding the sound with the right hand, and even improvising little cadenzas,
Mm-hmm.
which I have always done in my life afterwards. And I thought that this was a very good way to open the mind. I mean,
Yep.
so that was, let's say, my first contact with the HIP movement. That made me think that there is not one way.
Yep.
Yeah, and that music is much more interesting, much wider. It has a wider spectrum of possibilities than I ever imagined by the time I was 13. Afterwards, I remember I listened to Anner Bilsma's first. That was the first Bach cello suites recording by him, and also it was like blow-minding. It was
Yeah.
so incredible. It's like it's all different. The sound, the sense of the dances, the intonation. I mean, the pitch at 382. I think he's playing that first recording, and everything sounded like out of this world. And it happened to be when I did listen to him a couple of concerts after. Always, I can remember every piece he played in every program, and I'm talking about something that happened maybe more than 30 years ago. It was something like really gets into your mind. So I think these two artists were very important. And afterwards, of course, I studied with Monighetti in La Escuela Reina Sofia. And fortunately, Monighetti, despite his very Russian background, he liked it. HIP movement. He had a lot of respect for Bilsma, so he never cut my interest in this field. After I went to the States, and there were some kind of different influence that I will talk about later on. And I returned from the States. I got my first job in Orquesta de Castilla León, where I eventually became the co-principal. And one day I I started having lessons with a famous pianist called Ferenc Rados. And that's what, in a way, changed also my life, because it made me think that that music is much more important than anything instrumental. That the approach has to be always from the music point of view, and if you have to do something different with your instrument to achieve a certain musical um, goal, you
Mm.
should do it.
Yep.
You should do it. So this is the moment when I also started to play without a spike. I started to play with gut strings.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge process of changing and changing and changing, and it was quite something. It was like seven years that I was basically playing for him in Budapest, in France, Paris, Villecross, in Barcelona, in several places, and yeah, that made me think a lot and change tremendously all the approach to music and to the instrument. Actually, the funny thing is that when you change your musical approach, when you understand better the music, your instrumental approach changes.
Mm-hmm.
You do things that you never even thought you could. So that's very, very, very interesting. I like that process. And nowadays, the last thing I'm involved now is with it's a research. Yeah, very small group of musicians. We play concerts and we do the research in Paris. It's hosted by La Nouvelle Athènes. It's a foundation in Paris, and it focuses on romantic historical performance practice. And what we basically do is analyze historical recordings. We see how the people who actually met the composers or play for the composers, how did they play? Or how even sometimes we can listen to the composers themselves playing. And what I have noticed is that the idea that nowadays we have, let's say, in the mainstream of interpretation in the world, is there are a lot of misconceptions, I'm afraid. It's thought that we take for granted that, for instance, Brahms has to be played with lots of vibrato, lots of sound, thick textures, very stable, no portamento, no these wonderful tempo modifications that were normal at the Brahms period. So when you listen to people who worked with Brahms, then it's amazing because our concept is completely wrong in a way. In a way, our taste is completely different. Has been manipulated along the second half of the 20th century. Yep. I think it's very good to get to know all this because, for instance, one of the things I've been working, it was one of my first research about this, it was the wall of portamento. Yes. Portamento, as you very well know, is what some people call the glissandi. Glissandi is the slides that we do in between the notes, and something that is very natural for the singers. And it was very natural for the string players in the 19th century, even in the 18th century. But it's something that has been banned from the modern music world. It has been considered bad taste, has been considered that shouldn't be there. And the more you study all this, the more you realize that they did use a lot of different kind of portamentos. And it's actually it's wonderful. What I did, I was invited to a congress in Vienna, and I gave a sort of concert conference on all the expressive fingerings that are in the Souvenir de Spa by Servet. And some people call me the man of the 100 different portamentos. I think it's exaggeration, but it was really amazing because it was a work that I did analyzing the fingerings by Servet and analyzing many recordings. I found all kind of amazing kind of portamentos. Like, for instance, I could tell you just a couple of funny ones. Like Barsevich, for instance, was the first violinist, well, the only violinist that played with Tchaikovsky that recorded the second movement of Tchaikovsky violin concerto with piano, and we have this recording, and he does what I call the portamento to nowhere. He does a portamento which actually goes nowhere, and there is no justification. He didn't need to do it, but it becomes so vocal. It comes from the wall of singers. Very beautiful, very beautiful. Quiroga, for instance, Manuel Quiroga, the great Spanish violinist who studied in France, he does in playing Abendlied by Schumann, he does a double portamento. He didn't need. He could do tawam. He does ram. He goes down and up after, and you can hear this double portamento. Really beautiful.
That's so original.
It's very spectacular. Yeah, very original, completely. You hear, for instance, Isaí doing portamento from one note to the same note. Something we do very normally from higher string to lower string. He does from lower string to higher string. This is crazy. This is like no teacher in the world right now would allow anyone to do something like this. It would be like so. You just imagine the possibilities. Like you have 100 different possibilities of connecting two notes, or you have two. Like nowadays. Nowadays we have the anticipation shift, delay shift. That's it. And be careful when you go down descending. Only anticipation.
Only anticipation.
So it's so poor.
Yeah, and those things are only to make the music richer and to make a deepness in the musical understanding. And
of course,
I will go back to what you said before, and I will tell a little bit more about our history, my history of you and me. Because when we met, it was really interesting to listen what you said about Juan, and because it really remembers me to what happened with me.
That's nice.
That summer that we met in Punta Umbria, it happened the same. And when I met you, all my ideas and all the understanding I had from the music really changed. And now I would like to introduce an idea, and it's the idea of the seed. Those ideas that are revolutionary and that are changing our understanding are always getting into our subconscious. And at the beginning, we don't actually believe them but after, when we are exposed to them a second time, we start to believe them in another way, or we kind of accept them. So this is what happened with me. And after that summer course, I started to try all those things that you told me about Boccherini sonata that I played for you. And I also played this Golterman concerto, if you remember.
I remember. Yes.
And of course, when I saw you playing without the end pin and with the gut strings, I never saw that. It was so new for me. And at the beginning, I'm very, I questioned everything. And at the beginning, I questioned how and why are you playing like that? And that was good, because that summer after that, I was doing a process of understanding, and I could experience myself that process, and those ideas started to make something new in my playing. And that's why I decided to contact you again, and to be able to know more about that things. And that's why I went to study with you, of course. And this idea of the seed is very interesting, because my aim today with this interview is to do this thing that you did with me and Juan did with you. We can try to make it for our audience today. It will be interesting to make them, to introduce them this seed in their subconscious. And that's why we come to the point that you were talking, and it's the performance practice of course, what you are now more interested about, it's the performance practice of classical romantic period. And yeah, you have explained it, but I would like to ask you again, what's performance practice for you? What does it mean for you?
Mhm. It's a great question. I think we have lots to talk about. First thing, I want to go back to this little thing you mentioned about the seed. I think it's so important what you have said, because nowadays we're in a society that everything has to be done fast. Everything you have to take the airplane, and what is the fastest way to go somewhere? What is the fastest way to learn something? What is the fastest way to achieve something? What is the fastest? Everything is so fast that no one tastes anything finally. I mean, this is. I think I will never forget when I remember I was in the studio of great cellist Janos Starker in Vienna. And I remember he would sit down there, and we always would have to listen to all our colleagues' lessons. That was so wonderful to do. And sometimes I remember that he was teaching something or someone, and you could tell the student wasn't getting the idea. It was like he was trying, but he couldn't get it. And Starker, by the time he was 75 years old or something, and he was very intelligent, and he said, don't worry, you need time to assimilate. Nowadays, he told us, I got letters from students that I had 30 years ago, and they say, oh, master, now I understand what you meant. So this is very important for me. Since I mentioned Mr. Starker, I remember that this was, I studied with him almost 25 years ago. And still nowadays, every moment I have any doubt, instrumental, technical, I remember what he would say in that point, and always inspires me so much. I mean, all the principles and the healthy way of playing an instrument, I don't think I've ever seen anyone like him. It's very unfortunate that nowadays I see that it's true. The level of overall cellist in the world, even Starker himself, he said that in the 90s, back in the 90s, I remember he would say, now we are living in a way the golden time of cello playing, in the sense that there are more and more cellists than ever. The teachers are very good, and the amount of cellists that come out is bigger than ever. This is true. This we cannot deny. But what I can see in the so-called mainstream great cellists of today is that the approach, the noble and honest and sincere approach to music that Casals had, that Starker had, that Fournier had, is lost in them. I heard some cellists that my only impression is that they trying to vibrate more every day. Or play louder every day, or play faster every day. And it's just, I think it's such, they are victims of the system. Even though they think they are very lucky because they are making a lot of money. Well, not these days with coronavirus, of course.
Not now.
Not right now. Maybe it's a good time for them to think that that's the wrong way of making music. That's the wrong way to evolve as a musician, and that's giving the wrong message to the new generations. I think the new generations deserve people like Starker or like Rados or like Sebok, giving true meaning, the human meaning of music, not the business of
Not the
music.
business.
If business is playing faster, louder, and with more intense and more vibrato, this is very unfortunate. I
This
mean,
is
and well, maybe I'm a little cruel. This is a generalization. Of course, there are people doing wonderful music nowadays. It's not that I want to criticize everybody, but I think I see a dangerous, let's say, dangerous string.
yeah, it's totally true that the canon of how to play the cello, but that's what we know, has changed a lot. And now I can see also I'm very interested in another areas of the art. And you can see that in every area of music, of the cinema making, of everything. Everything has come into a point that the business and money making is the first point in everything. And what you said about that, about the athletic point of a musician, I think it's, of course, it's very healthy to be an athletic musician and to be able to play fast, to be able to play loud. That's something that only can
Of
help
course.
if you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
how to make those things help to your playing.
Of course. If they serve the music, it's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yes.
Yeah. No, sorry.
No, of course, I have to continue because your question was, what is performance practice?
What is
Right?
performance practice?
That's quite it's the question of the day, I guess. Because, yeah, performance practice. That's a wonderful question because maybe if I had to answer with one word, I'm going to make it harder for myself. One word I would say is culture. Culture. It's culture.
I see your point.
It's, if you don't know, I remember today, for instance, I was teaching Schumann, Adagio and Allegro, and I asked the student, "Oh, how many songs by Schumann you know?" Didn't know. How many singers specialize in Lida do you know? I don't know. What is life for Schumann all about? What disease he had? They didn't know. They don't know who was Schumann. They didn't know he had this bipolarity. They didn't know this great love that he had for Clara, all the suffering and all the great moments that he went through. They didn't know all this content of the romantic poetry that is described in the songs. They didn't know how Schumann managed to picture and to put into sound those poems, to the point that finally the poem, compared to the song, is ridiculous. Just imagine how great Schumann or Schubert or Brahms they can be, that they make a poem from this level to who knows where, to heaven, really. If you play, for instance, I had another student playing Paganini variations on one string. Remember the Moses? I'm sure you have played the one string Moses variation. And I was asking the student, well, you can play the notes, but the meaning of the notes, as Casals would say, is not there. You didn't understand the meaning of the notes. Why you didn't understand the meaning of the notes? Because you have no culture. I asked her, well, did you listen to opera? Do you know some Rossini's operas? Do you know what is opera buffa? Do you know what the characters in the opera by Rossini they do if it's an opera buffa? And all this, what is an aria? The introduction is this big aria. And after we have the opera buffa, and it's a very feminine character. She even thought it's a masculine character. So, you know what I mean? It's like if there is no culture, there is no performance practice. So that's why it's so important that nowadays, if we want to play Brahms well, it's not, we cannot just isolate ourselves, take the notes, take the Urtex edition. We take the Urtestitis and we say, okay, here it says this, here it says that, now I play great.
Uh-huh.
No, that's horrible, horrible, because the notation, the music notation is very, 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 very poor.
Mm-hmm.
They all knew Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn. They knew this was very poor. Mozart even wouldn't write many passages because what for? What for? You know. And Beethoven, they say when he premiered the Kreutzer Sonata with Bridge Tower, actually, there was a person turning the pages for him. He said there was nothing there. He had everything in the head, and he would modify depending on the day. And Joachim is very famous for saying that people already at the end of the 19th century, they were losing the skill to be able to read between the lines. If you don't know how to interpret the notation, then it's ridiculous. Now we know that there are so many things are meant to be different than what is written down. If you take it literally, it's like it's something in Spanish we call the sentido figurado, right? And all the is how's in English sentido a figure sense.
Figure sense.
It's like figure sense. Is that you say something, but you mean absolutely something completely different. This happens in language continuously. You don't think this is going to happen in music?
It's like ironic language, for example.
Absolutely.
And what you said is very interesting, because if you come to a part of the world where they use that kind of language, you will not understand it, and you will take it into personal way, and you will say, what are you saying to me? Are you stupid? And
yes.
It's very funny. You are following exactly all the points I wanted to talk, but
that's nice.
I wanted to talk about the composer intention, and I wanted to introduce a little story of rehearsals. When I was rehearsing once, I had a trouble with the musical notation and musical markings, because people, as you said, they don't have the culture to understand that musical notations and musical markings are not enough, and they don't mean what the composer wanted, and that's so implicated in the culture of the musician. And you're following exactly what
I'm glad to hear.
Yeah. And another point I wanted to talk, it's the division of the theory and the practice, that it's something that has been happening for a long time, and we have two kinds of person now. I think it's very normal to find someone that is practicing for 8 hours every day the cello, and they try to perfection all those technical aspects and things. And on the other hand, we have people that are studying and are trying to find those things into the music or out of the music that helps to understand the music. And is it necessary to come closer to the composer intention to make a theoretical study on research? I mean, do we have to do a research to understand the composer? Is it really necessary?
Okay, that's a good question, but we have to unify concepts. Let's see. When you talk about the player that spends 8 hours practicing to achieve perfection, that perfection doesn't exist. It's a mechanic perfection, which is nothing to do with music. A person many people who really finally they got a job in orchestras, they think they play perfect. It's nothing to do. They play the notes the way they expect the jury would like and would be politically correct for them, and that's they call perfection. Nothing to do. I mean, when I listen to Horowitz playing a piece and maybe he will miss one or two notes, I call that closer to perfection than when I heard the typical pianist impeccable, everything impeccable, also quoting marks, and doesn't say anything to me, and it doesn't bring the beautiful message of the composer to the audience. Actually, I remember just not to forget about the composer's intentions and the music. Because I remember one anecdote that Georgi Sebok, the great pianist, musician, that Hungarian, he was one of the, in Starker's opinion, one of the greatest musicians in the 20th century. And he said that he met Copland, Aaron Copland, you know, the great American composer, Appalachian Springs and all these beautiful pieces. And there was a student playing for Copland the Passacaglia for solo piano or something. And there is a big moment when there are some chords and Copland stopped him, say, no, this is all wrong. What are you doing? He went to piano and he played super free and very, very exuberant way, no? And the student look at him and he say, well, maestro, this is so beautiful what you did, but it's not what you have written. and Copland look at him, half smiling, and say, okay, you tell me how I write what I just played.
It's impossible.
It was impossible. It was impossible. So this just to make sure, and, you know, about the, so about the research. Okay, let's say if you are going to play a piece of music, do you need to research? My first answer would say no. I will explain you why. If you do have a music culture and you are playing a new piece, let's say you're playing a new trio by Schumann, and you know Schumann music, and you have played symphonies by Schumann, and you have listened to his songs, you might, even like me, playing his Dichterliebe in two or three different continents in your life, then you don't need to do an extra research to play a new Schumann trio. Because the language we are talking is the same. You know the language, you know how it works, the mobility, you know how it works, the modulations, you know how it works, the music in terms of going forward or going backward, or the style, articulation, ensemble. You know those things, you apply it to the music which shares this language. So I don't necessarily have to do extra research every time I play a piece. Of course, it will be different if I have to play a piece by a modern composer, which I'm not so familiarized, then I would do some research. Okay, if tomorrow I have to play, I don't know, let's say a Britten piece, it's not music I'm playing continuously. So I might research in the sense that I listen to more of his works to see how generally he organized music, what things are in common in his music, to understand what he wants to do with music, what's the way of expressing everything, his language, I mean, in one word. But in general terms, I would say you just have to have the good culture, knowing the language, and then studying the score. That's the secret. You have to research the score. Yes. That's I would say.
That's very interesting. And as you said before, there is this limitation of the musical notations and this culture that needs to be in our mind before to prepare the music. For example, this is something very natural. For example, in jazz music, you will never play a tumbao in time. So now we come to the characteristics of the performance practice. And for example, you talked about portamento, and now I would like to ask you about the tempo rubato. That it's something that the composer cannot write, but as the tumbao does, for example, and all the people, nobody will question that the tumbao is not in the beat.
In the
But for
beat,
example, some people are able to question whenever we play in a slur, the second note needs to be a bit shorter, and the people doesn't do it. But we have the evidence to know that this was made.
absolutely. Yeah.
So can you tell us about the tempo rubato and a personal question? This is a bit of joke. Aldo, is it normal to play as a metronome?
Actually, this is a very good subject, which I like very much. Because, of course, okay, just to say something fast, I think metronome could be our best friend or our worst enemy. Everything depends how we use it.
Yep.
So, of course, metronome is a tool to check certain speed for the beginning of a piece. And okay, this is good. Or some passages that we know we're having difficulty and we are slowing down only because of technical reasons, we do have this tool to help us not to do something that we don't want to do musically. Okay, having said this, I would say that metronome is one of the worst terrorists in the classical music world in the last half century. because people have lost one of the most amazing, beautiful, incredible ways of making music interesting. The expression of tempo, the expression of rhythm, the expression of agogics. This is something that that's why I'm so interested in historical recordings, because by the time the Joachim or the students of Joachim or Reinecke, if you hear the great pianist Karl Reinecke, you hear that they have this. They have this. They know Brahms, for instance. He was complaining very much when he would go to conduct one of his pieces to an orchestra, and if the orchestra didn't know well the piece, he was very, very mad. You know why? He said literally, I cannot do the pushing and pulling that I need to do with the music. You know, so we do know that the concept of tempo modification, the concept of, I call it the expressivity of the rhythm, was there. They did have it. They knew they have to do it. And the great artist was the one who knew it to do it better. Now this was completely lost. And now we have people that think that playing metronomic, and they practice whole piece metronomic. It's like, you just imagine that we did this interview on a metronomic way. Hello, Javier, how are you? This is very nice too. It's the most ridiculous. The most ridiculous, and
would be funny.
It would be very funny. The horrible thing is that in music, it became not even funny. It became the rule. The rule is the normal. One thing, for instance, that I have is my little complaint about the historical HIP movement. I have two little complaints about them. And one is that they neglect portamento. even we know that Beethoven, when he played with Dragonetti Beethoven's second cello sonata, he played with this great double bass player, Dragonetti, and Beethoven say, "What a wonderful musician! With his giant violin, he does the most wonderful. He does the most wonderful portamenti." So he especially liked the amount and the quality of his portamentos. And you can imagine in double bass how natural it is to do portamento.
Of course.
Yeah. So this is one complaint I have about HIP movement. And the other one is regarding agogics, because I think they are very much like mainstream. They also can be very metronomic. Not all of them, of course. There are exceptions, and they are wonderful people. But this, in general, I would say that this concept of expressivity in tempo and in rhythm has been lost. And for me, the only way to recover it is through the historical recordings and through research. Here, yes, we need research. Know what Joachim did say about it, how he played, how Reinecke played. Well, I don't know if you heard the piano rolls by Karl Reinecke. Have you?
No.
Oh, it's the most amazing experience you can have, because Reinecke, he was friend of all the great musicians of 19th century. He almost got to meet Beethoven. It didn't happen, but almost. I mean, he was the teacher of Greek. He was teacher of some of the greatest musicians, and he was very famous, not only as a great composer, but also his interpretation of Mozart. And it was said that his Mozart was the most, the one who really resembled what would have been in Mozart, how Mozart would have played, basically. Yeah, it's like they consider him the highest level of Mozart. Okay, good. Having said this, if you listen how he plays Mozart, it is amazing. Nowadays, they would throw him tomatoes every 2 seconds.
It's bad taste. He does, now.
Nowadays, it would be, look, he plays everything arpeggiation. He never plays pa. So beautiful when you get used to. Okay, he does tempo modifications. He does ornamentations. He does improvisations. He does everything that the classical musician of nowadays would not do. Of course, in HIP movement, there are some people doing ornamentation and, of course, and many nice things with Mozart. But to the extreme of Reinecke, no one. This is really out of this world right now. And maybe if we listen now how Bach played, or how Beethoven played, or how Mozart played, we would be, we would. Claro, it's another taste. It's another taste, completely different.
So this is actually the main thing of the performance practice, to find those things that we cannot see in the score, but that they were doing in those times. And it's very, very interesting how you talk about the correct or safe performance versus the beautiful and the risk performance.
That's well. Yeah, it's very good. What you just said is exactly what Spohr, say the great violinist Ludwig Spohr. He said that we have to distinguish between the mediocre correct performance, which just tries to play the notes, and the beautiful performance, which goes beyond. Yes, yes, very good, very good. Exactly.
But we have the problem today, as we have told, that is the fear about the consequences of playing in that style, in terms of job finding or opinions, because we have the structure of the music of the world music today. It's very divided, and we have those people that are very high in this structure, that are giving us the ways of playing and are putting away those options of playing. So that's a question I have. How can we make this fear something that we can handle? Because it's in every university we study, for every normal teacher, it happens that they are saying, oh, but this is not right, this is too much, or this is too personal, this is too individualistic, even.
That's the best thing they can say about you.
I have a very, very funny story. This year I was playing my final exam, and one of the jury said about my Beethoven that it was all the time changing and it was never the same. So whenever I played one phrase, the next time that it was repeated, it was never the same. And
good for you. Congratulations.
That was my question. He said it in a bad way. He was telling me that it was not logical, because it was not written. But then I said, he asked me, it is your goal to make it not similar? And I said, of course, it is my main goal, because I really look for the difference between. It will be boring, actually, to say something always in the same way. We don't speak like that. And how do you handle this fear?
Now you touch a very difficult issue, because of course I do understand the situation of young musicians. Of course, they want to make a living with their playing and with their music. It's the best thing can happen to us. I mean, for me, in a way, it's easier because I have very established, life, so I can basically do anything I want. Yeah, I can experiment with what I want, everything. I don't have the fear that I will go to orchestra audition and I will play in a way that maybe they won't like. I don't have that fear. For instance, if I want to interpret the beginning of Haydn D major, right, the cello solo, I do believe he means apportamento. Can you imagine I go to an orchestra, I do that? I will be out, of course, unless the jury is stop enough. Exactly. It will be the shortest audition ever.
A world record Guinness you could do.
Yes. Well, something is something. So, my belief is that, of course, you have to know the kind of world we are, and if you do an audition, you know that you have certain limitations in the things you can do. You could believe that Haydn times they were doing portamentos. It's not that you believe. It's not a matter of belief. It's if you know it or not know it. If you have culture, you know it that it did happen. They were using portamentos and it was normal. You might know also that the tempo modification, it was something that it was used in Haydn. Of course, even the metronome wasn't invented by the time, So for sure, we know that Mozart and Beethoven, they were very free when they play. Their rubato was very, very wonderful and rich. You could believe this, but of course, if you're doing audition for an orchestra and you know that if you go too much into that direction, your chances are going to be very small. So what you do is you put limitation. You try to play as beautiful and as interesting as possible, how you really believe should sound, but in certain aspects, you put a little limits. But I think the best is to be honest. When you, I could tell that there are people that they went to auditions and they were thinking, oh, I don't want to offend this, I don't want to offend that, and they play very badly because they didn't even believe what they were doing. You know what I mean? So I think after all, the honesty at the moment of the truth, you have to show it. And it will make a difference. If you are honest and you play beautifully, even a stone, I think, could react. So let's hope those juries will be able to react to beauty and good music.
Yeah, this is the flexibility of playing. And this is very interesting what you said, because I believe you need to adapt to every situation. For example, if you are playing with colleagues that you know they are not able or they don't want to play in certain way, I think it's very smart from the person that is playing with them to adapt to the playing. And this is not something wrong. This is not something bad for your ego. This is something that makes you even greater and makes you even better, because you are trying to go with them.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a very good point. Actually, I would say that in my position, I have the luck because I play with many HIP players. Recently, I play, for instance, in Sevilla Baroque Orchestra. I play with Música Bocarecha, another very excellent Baroque, specialized Baroque groups. I play with mainstream players all the time, pianist, violinist, cellist, everything. And I play even with people in the historical romantic performance practice. So I think I'm one of the few musicians who can say have experience in all the fields. And it is very interesting to see that when you play chamber music, I mean, it's fundamental that you are very flexible. And of course, there are two moments, I would say. I would say that the moment of rehearsal is that when there are too many conflictive ideas, then you have to somehow seduce your colleagues through playing that maybe they should do different. Or sometimes you have to seduce your colleagues by talking and trying to explain why you think it should be on a different way. So, of course, this is difficult. Sometimes there are people, as you say, they are so insecure that they can only play one way. But in general, if you play with good people, the most normal thing is that there will be a nice, balance. They will get something, and this is one part, okay. And the other part is the actual performance. When you are playing the concert, what I don't like at all is when someone tells me, okay, here I'm going to do this and this. Say, hey, Aldo, are you going to do exactly this in the concert as you did now? And I always say, no, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, who knows? I mean, if you want a robot, buy a robot. I mean, I think there is two very funny stories I could say about this. One is there was at Bach's time, there was an organist that he was fired after 2 weeks of work in a church. You know why? Because he played the same piece the same way 2 Sundays. Can you imagine how many musicians would have lost their job nowadays?
It would be impossible to have musicians today then.
Exactly. And the other anecdote is about a very, 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 very famous violinist whose the name I'm not going to mention to be elegant, who people were saying, how amazing, play 50 times the Beethoven concerto in 2 months, and it was exactly the same from performance 1 to performance 50. I think it's the saddest thing. I mean, in
You
the
have a
world.
problem then.
I think so. I think so. I think we have a problem
Yeah.
because this is very, how to say, people think this is a great achievement. Oh, play perfect, always in tune, always metronomic, always what? I mean, this is nothing to do. So I like the Bach times when they fire someone for playing twice the same. It's
I
very funny.
think actually this is because of the complexity of the ideas that we are trying to do with this performance are actually not accessible, and it's very difficult for normal average people to understand this deepness. And that's why I believe nowadays we have this winning part of the playing like exactly always the same and very strict, because it's easier to do that. And the
Exactly.
complexity, of course, is less. And the repercussion, it's obviously less for people that tries to do in that way. So what can we do to help people? For example, you're playing a concert and you do it in that way, and probably people is going to be questioning a lot of things. So how can we help people to understand that?
That's yeah. In a way, what you are saying is that we have an educational job. We have to educate the taste. We have to. It's true. It's true. That's why. Well, you know about my Facebook publications these days that I'm presenting a lot of historical recordings where the concept of music was very very different. So I think this is good to educate people. First, they will know that there was another way of interpretation, another way of playing those pieces. And if you really, as you said before, research a little, you know, for instance, if you know, today I put the Rosé Quartet, you know that Rosé made the premiere of Brahms' works, that he was a brother-in-law of Mahler and worked with Mahler. And this, you would somehow have a lot of respect of what he does with the classical music. I mean, because he's a person that he was born in this environment, right? And then you listen, and I'm sure everybody will realize that it's different. The problem, of course, with historical recordings, for instance, the problem is that the sound quality is much worse. So I remember once a very famous cellist of nowadays. I like him very much, but sometimes he says unfortunate things. He said that Joachim, unfortunately, Joachim, by the time he recorded the recordings he did, he was very old, so they are not representative. So I think this is a complete mistake, because if you listen carefully to what Joachim is doing with his own romance or with the Brahms Hungarian dances and this, you will realize that the way of understanding music is very rich, is very interesting, and there is something, it's a world of sound and agogics and everything there. But of course, if you just listen and say, oh, it sounds, who is making a fried egg? It's a fried egg. so of course, if you just stay in the fried egg stage, then you are dead.
Yeah, this is something. It happens also in the cinema of the last century, and it's very funny how people try to analyze that kind of cinema only by the way it looks. So if you analyze it in the way it looks, it's of course the images are so old and there are no colors. It's black and white.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
music, it's very poor, and sometimes the sound, it's very, but
Yeah.
that's something that makes those films even better, because the possibilities they had, they were much
Hmm.
less.
Yes.
So the main focus was
Exactly.
always the argument,
Yeah.
the richness of the story,
Yes.
how to connect the personal
Yeah.
relations on the
Yeah.
characters,
The content was
content.
what was important. It's
Mhm.
true. It's true.
and
Actually.
and now it happens with the music, because when we listen to a recording nowadays, we have the possibility to listen people that have been recorded with the best microphones in the world, in the best studios on the world, with the best technical sound engineers that can
Hmm.
make those little notes that were out of tune, they can make it perfectly in tune.
Hmm.
And it's a pity that those recordings of Joachim and all these old people are not making the truth version of them, because they were much richer in those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course.
So I
Actually, if
understand
you
people.
yeah, actually, the real sound of Joachim or of Bersilovich or of Popper or any
Uh-huh.
of these artists, mm, is you cannot really not even you cannot even imagine how it was, despite we have those recordings, because the
Mm-hmm.
recordings of course, if you go to the wax cylinders phonograph from Edison, and you go to the gramophone Berliner, and you have the 78 revolutions per minute, and what happens is that these acoustic ways of recording did evolve, and at first they kill all the harmonics. I mean, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the harmonics, you don't have so many things. There were sometimes the singers, they would have the horn of the gramophone, and they were just singing there, or
Yeah.
they were with the violin in the horn, and if they move, they would lose it. And I mean, they had to play
Mm-hmm.
very different. Or
Mm-hmm.
they told them, don't do soft dynamic, because if you do soft dynamic, there is nothing.
We lose you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the performance was had to be adjusted for this kind of very primitive way of recording, of course. And what we have to say is that well, there is this famous story about, Sarasate, of course, the great
Mm-hmm.
Spanish violinist, and he was recording the
Uh-huh.
famous prelude from third partita for violin solo,
Mm-hmm.
and he played very, it's a challenging piece, virtuoso, and he make it all right, but the last note he missed,
Uh-huh.
and he missed, and he say merde, like shit, and it's recorded.
It's
You can
recorded.
hear it in the yeah, it is recorded, but still it was the best take, so they kept it. So it's very interesting to see that they really did play. There is not, these modern recordings nowadays that a violinist got there and they make
They
5,000
cut.
takes of the
Mm.
Paganini Caprice, and they go to the market. I play 24 Caprice Paganini. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, that's.
Mm.
I think that the recording nowadays, the problem is that the concept is just that the notes sound
Mm.
uh, is exactly what they think it should sound,
Mm.
but the music is lost because you don't have a sense of unity, you don't have a sense of construction of the piece, you don't have a sense of evolution of tempo, of colors, of everything. It's very difficult to make sense in a recording that has been so much cut.
Mm.
Of course, there are many artists nowadays that they don't record like that. They record live. I mean, or when I recorded in a studio or something, I try to do from beginning to the end. And I
Mm.
mean, if after they have to do something, they will do. But I mean, not to lose the sense. I mean,
Uh-huh.
otherwise it's too
The real
ridiculous. I mean,
meaning of a
yeah,
performance.
yeah. Otherwise it's a Frankenstein. It's a Frankenstein, totally. The monster of Frankenstein. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens with the modern recordings. And I actually wanted to talk also about that, and it's how different are, of course, the old recordings for the modern ones, because when you listen to several recordings of nowadays, the only things that actually change is the tempo, probably a bit of less vibrato, more vibrato, but they are quite similar in a way.
Yeah,
And,
I understand. I
and this is
understand.
something that doesn't help to students, for example, because whenever they want to listen for the first time a piece, they go to YouTube, they check out, and they have the same recordings in a way. So that's why I
Yeah.
think the first
Yes.
image, musical image that comes to our mind is quite the same. That's why I think it
Yeah.
doesn't.
Of course, I mean this is one thing very dangerous in music world, that is we are globalized. We have this globalization. So actually, really, I promise you, if I put let's say 10 recordings of famous violinists of nowadays playing the same piece, if you can guess who is who, really, you should get a prize, because they all sound. They also. I actually, it was recently. I think it was in the Schola Cantorum. I think in Basel, where they did a piece by Bach. I think from one of the English suites, and one piece. They put. I think it was 20 pianists playing it, one after the, like some parts. First bar, this pianist. Second bar, and it made perfect sense. It made perfect. It worked.
It worked.
So the sound is similar. The music way of making is similar. Yeah. So why we want 20 people play the same? I mean, this I think this personality, this individuality, it has been lost. Like for instance, when you hear someone like Starker, for instance, and you hear his sound, you can recognize him. They put you 100 cellists, you say this is a Starker. And if someone says I'm not saying the truth, is crazy or deaf. You know what I mean? And now you take 10 cellists, modern cellists, and they all sound the same. Very, very similar, very. You put a Starker, you put, I don't know, Feuermann, you put a Fournier, you put even Rostropovich. They sound very different. I mean, they are quite the personal sound, and in their way, a different way of thinking music. And I'm not talking, actually, if we go further back, like if we listen someone from the, let's say, because in the world of string playing in the 19th century, end of 19th century, we have to think that there are two major currents. It's the Franco-Belgian current and the German current. And in the Franco-Belgian, we have, Isaïe, Charles de Berrio, etc., etc. And in the German current, we have, which came from Spohr, Ferdinand David, Joseph Joachim, Karl Klingberg, etc., etc. And what happened? What happened is that these two different ways of playing, you can listen in cellis. You listen a cellist from the German part, for instance, Klengel. Yesterday in my Facebook post, I put Gewandhaus quartet with Klengel playing, and it was amazing. He played the solo in the Schubert, non-vibrato, portamento. It was very, very, different than what anyone would have done nowadays. And on the other hand, if you put a cellist, let's say a student of Servet, like Joseph Holman playing Chopin Nocturne, it's very, very different way of playing. He does portamentos in a different way. He uses more vibrato, Holman. So what did happen? That they were very individualistic. It was different, even though they did belong to the schools. What happened after in the 20th century is that unfortunately the German school got completely neglected. I guess. Like this way that we listened in Klinger or in Soldat, that was the heritage of the Beethoven tradition, let's say, it was very much lost. So the Franco-Belgian Isaïe, Chrysler afterwards, etc. This was the way that succeeded, let's say. And I heard who was, I think, Anne-Sophie Mutter. She said that she has no problem to admit that her version of the Beethoven violin concerto tries to imitate Chrysler version to the maximum. I think it's very sad you say that, but nowadays no one cares that she says something so crazy.
Because we have another approachment to what's performing, and actually the main problem is what we said before. It's that the business and the social media makes the people think less and makes people just do something without questioning what they are doing. And the reflexive point of the music, I think it's the most important one. And if you reduce it to imitate a recording, of course, imitation is the first part of learning. There is a point where you need to imitate. We learned about
very good
imitation. But
absolutely,
if you want to make your performance something that preserves in the time, you need to have your own voice. And I remember once I was in Salamanca in the conservatory, and I was walking around, and then I listened to cellos, and I go to the door, and I knew it was you and Eduardo. You were practicing, and this thing about the sound. When you recognize a voice, that makes so special your playing. And if you are playing and nobody can recognize your voice, I think it's something you are doing something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems that unfortunately not so many people are worried by this, but I have to say I think now we got to the moment we should talk about the hope for the future generation. I think the fact that someone like you is young, very nice cellist, you are asking me these questions, that gives me hope. It means that I think there will be more and more people that they will recognize, they will be honest to themselves and say, well, this is boring. This is boring. I don't go to concerts because it's boring. I get bored. Oh, but they are very famous. Yeah, but it's boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you go and you say, well, I don't want an orgasmic experience for half an hour of concerto, because they just play like that, everything. You know what I mean?
We are not going to say names, but
no,
we know who they are.
We know. They know, I guess. yeah. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows.
So everybody knows. So that's, it's a misunderstanding, I think. But actually, music is very peculiar because what this brings me back to what I told you at the beginning about the skill of music and the culture of music. Because you just imagine that you were a painter and you paint 5 times the same picture. and the people, anyone, no, doesn't matter how idiot they are, they will say, you are a cheater. You're a cheater. What are you doing? I mean, why you paint everything the same? It's like, or can you imagine you write a book and every 3 pages are repeated? And you say, well, sorry, this is a joke. But with interpretation, this is happening all the time, that people, they play like sleepwalkers. You know, I love this comparison. Sleepwalkers. It's like the automatic, no? Yeah,
automatic pilot.
I love it, this comparison. It's great. Sleepwalkers, they just memorize everything and they just play it, and it doesn't matter they are awake or not, because the result is the same. So, but in music, this is allowed. People don't come out of a concert of a famous conductor and say, what a boring performance. How on earth they did that? No, they say, oh, this person is very famous. Oh, I'm supposed to clap a lot. Because most people didn't understand what it's music about. But the good thing, I remember when I was small, that there was this great conductor, really, really great conductor, Sergiu Celibidache. Of course, Celibidache. He was the conductor of Munich Philharmonic Orchestra, wonderful musician, spectacular. And I went to some of his concerts. I had the luck to see him, which I will never forget. Also, it's like with Wilsma. I will never forget those two concerts I listened by him. And I remember in the intermission of one of them, I heard it was in Auditorio Nacional in Madrid, the biggest concert hall in Spain. And of course, it was a typical old lady with a fur coat, and you know that you think it doesn't know anything about music. Of course, doesn't know anything about music. And suddenly she said, you know, she was talking to a lady. Say, I really don't know why, but every time this gentleman comes, the music becomes meaningful. It's like
meaningful.
It says something to me. Yeah, it's meaningful. So even not knowing anything, when there is something real good, people will notice.
Yep. I have experienced that.
They will
also
say, I mean, no. I'm sure.
For example,
it's like we shouldn't think, oh, people don't know, so just play anyway. No. They will feel it.
Yeah, they feel it. And it happens when I was with Diltians in Italy, that he was doing a concert with Wolfish and Sebastian Converti. They were playing some pieces together, and I remember the moment when Diltian started to play the second movement of the Boccherini G major concerto, that very beautiful first long note, and I could feel all those people in Lucca. Of course, they were not musicians, experts, but I could feel how we were all being like touched and being inspired by the moment. Absolutely. Because he took us from the very first moment, and we were with the heart here like, wow, what is this?
This is real. Yeah.
And it happened also with Diltians in Cello Biennale, where it was very interesting to see all those different styles of playing. I could see Misha Maisky. I could see a lot of great cellists of this moment.
Yeah.
And if you see them in one night, one next to the other, you can, it's not good to compare, of course, but the feelings never lie. And when he was playing with gas strings, and he was the sound was not coming very far ago, because it was not the instrument issues, but the quality of his pitch, the quality of his what he had to say with the music was so rich that, of course, there was a very special moment at the end of the second movement of Carl Philippe, this slow movement.
Yeah.
And when he finished the cadenza, he took his peck, his C peck, and he started to put it down and down to finish into an A with the orchestra, with the A minor chord with the orchestra. And
so he made like a portamento, peck portamento.
Peck portamento, and
nice.
everybody was just like, what? This is unbelievable. This is because he was doing something different.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful idea. Beautiful.
And doing a risk.
Yeah.
Putting risk in the performance.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Yeah, that's I think what
that's
really
what it's all about.
Your...
Nice to hear. Yeah, good idea.
Very original.
Very original. Yes. Well, nowadays talking about scordaturas and this, I have to play a piece in Japan. Well, I will be in Seville, but the concert will be in Japan actually, and I will play a piece which half cello I have in 440, and half cello in 415.
Oh no, really?
Yes. So well, basically I play A, C sharp, G, D. Yeah. It's very interesting combination, actually. Yeah.
A modern piece, or?
Yeah, very modern. It's for Japanese no boys. No is kind of a Japanese theater, NOH, no. And she's a very wonderful singer, and I mean specialized in this kind of. She has her particular voice, and many contemporary composers write for her. And this piece I premiered in Tokyo. We premiered together in Tokyo a couple of years ago. Ryoko Aoki is her name, and we're gonna do the experiment of playing a chamber music concert live. I'll be in Spain, she will be in Japan, and she will perform other pieces, several pieces written for her.
Wow.
So this, let's see if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. With now it's the only way.
You never know.
Yeah. You never know. Hopefully. Yes.
But hopefully, yes. So
exactly.
Aldo, it has been a really pleasure to be able to share with you all these ideas and to get inspired one more time about what you have to say in the world of music. And yeah,
thank you so much, Javi. That was. Thank you for the invitation. It was wonderful to have this wonderful chat with you, and seeing that you are also evolving in your musical mind, and it was very, very smart. I mean, many nice issues and things. I think we solved the world, basically.
I think one more time we can say we are the G2. And we're solving all those. No, but I think we try to do this thing that we comment as at the beginning of this interview, that we installed a seed into people's minds, and probably people are gonna see this and they are gonna think, oh, but this is not what I really think. But this is gonna be in the subconscious of them, and probably next time that they are gonna be exposed to this idea, they're gonna accept it, or even they're gonna try to look for these things.
Yeah.
So
it's gonna like they say in English, it's gonna ring in their minds. It's gonna ring. So it's good if one day someone who listened to this conversation got to know what Fari Davis said when she was in the rehearsal with Brahms, and Brahms was explaining she is explaining to us what she saw that Brahms was doing with his chamber music, or so you will say, oh, those two guys were talking something about this. So that's already made this interview really worthy if this happens. Yes. Thank you so much, Javi.
You're
Great
welcome,
player.
and thank you so much for being here. And subscribe, subscribe, and put a like. Well, ciao, ciao.
Ciao.